Okay, right. So let's get started. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining Saturday morning. And so I would like to, walk you guys through how the tickle is being used in the industry, and we'll pick up certain practical issues that we normally see, and then we will actually go over, okay, and how this tickle, basically regular tickle scripting, and then when it comes to the tools, so how it is going to be different and we'll go over all that. Okay. Okay, so the agenda for the day is basically, so we'll be giving you a quick introduction about VLSI mentors, and then EDA scripting, the course delivery plan, and then how the TCL is being used in the industry, and we will go over the whole language syntax, and what are the different the types of variables. Say we have a regular variable, we have something called array, we have something called associative arrays, and then lists and all that. And then we will also go over the loops. So how do we control certain things? Say for example, if else, we have while and for each and all that. And then expressions, arithmetic operations, and then regular expressions and all that. And then strings manipulation, so how you can actually work with the strings. And then, as I mentioned, the tickle arrays. And the important thing is basically the procs. Uh, so that is what being used heavily in industry, because each and every command that we have in industry, right, they are all pretty much kind of a proc. Okay, so when you run a command, it runs internally, couple of say certain amount of code, and then get you the job done. Okay. And file operation, so how do we open a file for reading, and then how do we open a file for writing and all that. And regular expressions and real world problems. So this is a kind of agenda. I'm not sure how much we would be able to cover in a given time, but we will try to cover, and we'll also have a kind of we'll pick up a problem, one of the problem, and we'll try to write a code. Okay, so that you guys get an idea of what exactly how do we actually come up with the say algorithm, and then what kind of commands do you use and everything. That's going to be the agenda. And coming to the Q&A session, please have your questions noted. Uh, you will find the slide numbers over here, so you can actually stop me and ask, write down the page number as well, and the question, and we will actually have it in the end actually. Okay. Okay. So VLSI Mentors, it's founded by a team of people in 2022. Okay. And trainers, I'm the main trainer, where I have got close to, uh, 20 plus years of experience, and I have been mentoring people uh, since 15 years, and expertise in top level, subsystem level, and block level. So the whole complete backend implementation, so including PD, STA, and everything. And we have handled, I have experience in kind of handling, say, more than 3 years designs, and and the whole team, if I counted, like kind of we have 100 plus projects taped out. I myself have kind of 50 plus projects that I have taped out in my whole career. And the technology nodes that we have expertise is basically 250 nanometer, 3 nanometer. And what we offer right now is basically physical design mentorship. And it is a completely hand holding sessions, covers all the way from RTL to GDS. And so EDA scripting and mentorship. So that's what we are covering now. So basically you will have the TCL Pearl, and then writing a command, the scripts, some of the scripts that you will go, will discuss. And so that is basically the VLSI Mentors introduction. Okay, so we'll come to this later. Okay, so let's get started on the tickle scripting fundamentals. So why do we need tickle scripting? I'm sure you are here because you might have heard about, okay, the importance of scripting. Okay, and so why it is important. Now if you look at it, like there might be certain tasks which we might want would like to repeat, would like, there might be certain repetitive tasks. Okay, and those things you might want to automate it, so that like it can save your time. Okay, you don't need to sit and do it every time manually and all that, so it could actually save your time. That is the main reason. And so is that tickle is the only thing that is being used? The answer is definitely no. So we have other languages as well, so we can use Perl and Python and different things. But remember, inside the tool we use pretty much TCL's language, or and outside the tool environment we always use, it can be anything. So you can use Perl, Python, or even TCL also you can use outside the environment as well. Okay. So what is this tickle? So it's basically built on the fly commands, procedures, platform independent and easy to use. And there are, you can also build GUIs using this, tickle as well. It's called a toolkit. So that is actually kind of, when you are trying to come up with the tool, or you want to develop your own tool, then you might need this TK based, expertise. But if you are just going to be, say, working in industry, say physical design or say STA or DFT and those things, you don't need to, be that, you won't be using this TK at all. Okay. Okay. So the simple thing here is, it's basically, if you look at here, tickle commands, it is always kind of, is it okay now? Maybe others, can someone else confirm that, you can hear my voice clear? It may be a problem at your end. Okay. All right. Okay. So now the first thing is basically setting up a variable. So it's basically, if you look at it, like kind of, one or more words separated by a space. Okay. So usually, so it is a kind of, so if you look at it, like when we say command, it's just a single command. It is kind of, we can call it like kind of, say set project Tesla, say something like this. So this is one command. Now, what is the meaning of scripts? So scripts is basically, it is a multiple commands put together. Okay. Now, if you look at it, like kind of, say this whole thing, you can just say hello.tickle, or say example.tickle, say something like this. So now put all these in a file, and you source this inside the tool, or say in the tickle shell environment. Okay. Now, the first thing in any command is basically the keyword, the tickle keyword, that would be, internally used by the TCL cell. Okay. And then the next is your variable, and this is going to be your, the value. Okay. Now that is for a set. Now the next one is basically, say, puts. You wanted to print something, then you can actually use this put. Say in how, C programming and all, right, like you might have already an experience in C programming. Now you might have it like kind of, say printing it, printf and things like that, right? Like kind of, similar here we have something called puts. Say when it comes to, shell scripting, or say any Linux command, we call it like kind of, say echo, right? So here in TCL, to print anything, it is basically puts. And say set A, it's basically a kind of, defining a variable, say 10, and the set B, it's basically, say another variable. Now you want to, kind of, you can say like kind of, say print both of them. So how do we print that? Okay, say, just let me know if the font size is okay, or should I increase it? Okay, now if you guys look at here, so we have, say for example, say set a 10. Okay, now if you want to print this value, okay, say use puts dollar, say if you just say a, it would just print the a alone, the, you can call it like kind of, the alphabet, right? Now if you want to print the value, what we need to do is it's basically say dollar a. Okay, so that is how you can actually call that variable. All right, now say for example, say set b, say 15. Now you want to print both of that. Say for example, puts now dollar a and dollar b. Now it is not allowed because you are giving a, it is expecting only the two arguments. Say for example, puts and then the whole thing. Now you need to give it in a double quote. Okay. Now let's say you want to give, say anything that you try to put it in this, it would be just kind of printed, but only thing is the variable substitution happens. Okay, so there's dollar a, now it is basically 10, and then dollar b, which is basically 15. Now let's say you want to print it like kind of, say a equal to dollar a, say b equal to dollar b. So now it is going to be kind of, say a is equal to 10 and b is equal to 15. Okay, now so you want to now be print it in a different, or say there is something called slash t. So it is a kind of tab. So you can actually space it like this. And you can also use, say, slash n, that is to print them in a new line. So slash t, okay, and slash n is commonly used. So I think it is similar in each and every language. Uh, okay, so you can actually print these things like this. Okay, so now that is just a basic. So how do you define a variable, and then uh, how do you print them, how do you reuse them in your scripts and etc. All right, now the next one, if you look at here, say now we would end up in doing a lot of arithmetic operations. So what is the use of this arithmetic operation? What is the use of these arithmetic operations? Yeah, why do you need that? Okay, a simple thing. Now, if you guys look at, right, like kind of, say this is your macro. Okay, say this is your macro. Now you wanted to query the coordinate. Can you please go on mute if you're not talking? So now you want to query this macros location, and you want to post process this value. Say for example, if I have to ask this, right, like kind of, so now if you go and take a look at here all, so you will have something like a boundary or boundary box. So now if I have to do this, what I do, say get selection. Okay, now say get attribute, say boundary. Now I am actually getting all the four coordinates. So now if you look at here, any macro that you take, it is basically going to have a, say for example, now this is going to be, say x1 y1, x1 y2, say x2 y2, and say x to y1. So any kind of rectangle, or say anything that you try to process, it is all going to be something like this. Okay, now you might want to refer this and do something. Okay, so now you need to add numbers or minus numbers, certain things, and etc. Say for example, now in physical design world, what we normally do is we actually try to avoid the routes coming close to the macro. Okay, so you might want to create a routing blockage around this macro. Okay, you might want to create a routing blockage around this macro. So eventually now you need to get the macro location And then you need to post process these numbers, and then you need to go and create the blockages. Okay, so now to get that, you definitely need the arithmetic logic. Okay, so plus and minus and etc. So now how do we do that? So how do we do that? So if you look at, right, like kind of, say kind of, you look at here, say set C. Now you cannot say like kind of, dollar A plus dollar B. Okay, when you do this, it would actually, this C will have exactly the same thing whatever it is here. Okay, now it is not actually doing that operation. You know what we need to do? So it is basically, there is a command to get these arithmetic operations, executed. Now say for example expr. Okay, now when I say expr, that means it is going to perform arithmetic operation. Say dollar a plus dollar b. So now 10 plus 15, it is basically 25. Okay, so now for example, now you use this minus. Say it is kind of minus 5. Now say star. It is a multiplication. Okay, and then now division. Say it is kind of 0, and then say modulus. So so these are all the some of the things that you can actually use here. Okay, now using this, now what we can actually do is, I might be interested in going and getting these values, and post processing these values whatever that I am getting. Say for example, now okay, now I have got these numbers. So now how do I get to know that, okay, which is the number that I have to process and etc. Now if you look at here, now there are different things. So one is boundary, and then there is something called b box. So now in this scenario, when I run b box, it is only going to return my x1 y1, these values. Okay, x1 y1, and this is going to be my x2 and y2. Got it? Now with this value, so now you need to start processing these numbers. Okay, so now how do you get these numbers out one by one? Okay, now we will discuss all that. Okay, so now we were actually talking about a basic, the typical language syntax. Okay, so we are kind of discussed about, say something like kind of set a, set b, set c, and etc. Okay, now set c. Now I want to do the same arithmetic operation and then save it in a variable. Now you need to use the something square bracket. So expr dollar a plus dollar b. Now this would actually, why do we need square bracket here is, say square bracket is basically the another shell, the TCL. This operation is executed internally, and the value is saved, or say loaded into this variable. Okay, now the square bracket is an important thing because we would be using a lot. See, now even if you look at here, right, like what is this? There is a square bracket. So square bracket is basically another shell that is invoked, and then we actually get it. See, now if we ask me, say this one itself, say for example set macro b box, that is a variable I am going to use or create with these things. Now my macro b box will have these values. Okay, now say puts dollar macro box, this will have these values printed. Okay, now having said that, why do we need this square bracket? That means the square brackets say get selection, whatever that I have selected in the GUI, that actually being pulled, that is, the tool gets that out, get selection, and then I'm trying to query an attribute of that particular instance. And what attribute I'm actually interested in, I'm looking at, say something like kind of, the b box. Okay, that is basically the bounding box. All right, And then now that whole information, anything that the command returns, now that is basically saved to a variable. Now I would be processing this variable in the next set of codes. All right. Okay. Now whatever we are doing till now. So for example, say set ABC, say kind of 100. Okay. Now how many values that we are actually attaching here or say storing here. Now this is a simple variable. If you guys look at this, is basically a simple variable. Now you're just setting only one type value, only one value. You know what? Now you also can set multiple values, say set A, B, C, D. Now you have to say it like kind of, say 200, 300, and 400. Now this is something we call it like kind of lists. So this is a simple variable. So this particular thing, whatever that you see here, this is basically a simple variable. Okay, and this particular syntax, or this something, this we call it like kind of list, more than one value. Okay, it is basically a list. Now, so this is another one. There is another method is also there. So you guys, this kind of say, you can see, take it like kind of an introduction session. You can also go back and learn it later. Okay. Now this is a variable and a list. All right. And now, is there any other methods are available? Yes. Now say for example, now say library. So I'm sure if any of you, I'm sure most likely all of you from the VLSI background. So you guys know that libraries, right? Like say libraries where you might have a say HVT library, say SVT library or LVT or ULVT kind of thing. Okay. Now you might want to put all these in one variable. Okay. So now how we can actually do that is say set lib HVT. Say it is a library is basically say proj library, say HVT, say SS 0.95 volt 125C dot lib. Okay, say for example, now the same way, say kind of, now say this is LVT. Okay, now you might have it like kind of, say SVT. Now see if you try to, okay, now if you see this, this is something we call it like kind of, this variable, this way of defining a variable, it is called arrays. Okay. Now you can have it like kind of, say SVT is the variable, the array element, and this is the value. Okay. And LVT is the array element and it has the value of this. So now this structure is something we call it like kind of, say arrays. Now in array itself, you can have a multiple dimensions. Okay. Say multi-dimensional arrays as well. So now see here it is something we have only one element, but there might be people, say on a simple note, right? Like kind of, let's just take this. Say you may have it like kind of, say HVT under say comma, say setup corners. Okay, so you might have it like kind of, say this is kind of say setup one. Say setup one underscore, say something like this. Now you might have it like kind of set up to and multiple corners, and you can also have it like kind of HVT itself, there might be hold corners and etc. Say it is all these kind of say library. Say in this case you might have it like kind of say hold and say normally we will have it like kind of ff 1.05, okay, and n40c. Say now the industry uses all these kind of structures. Okay, so if you look at here, what and all we have discussed till now, the simple variables, okay. And then we have also discussed about list. So it is a one value, only single value. When you say variable, a simple variable, and multiple values, it's called list, okay. And then so in the variable itself you have a multiple things, that is elements that you are trying to add it. That is something we call it like kind of say array. All right. So these are all the different ways of variable definitions and the structures that are available in TCL. Okay. uh, so probably I'll stop here for a question and answer session. You guys have anything that you wanted to ask? Hey, hi. Probably I will come to that. The question is here, you wanted to know more of this array thing, right? So that's what you are looking for, right? Yeah. So uh, we will actually try to spend some time, because for me the other syntax and all we will try to cover it. So there's a kind of advanced, this array is something that is an advanced topic, okay. So before that I need to go and cover little quickly on the list spots and other things and all, so that, like, see, as I told it, I want to pick up one of the practical problem, and I wanted to solve it, right? Like, so array is something that we will do it in the end. Is that okay if you can wait? Okay, all right, so let's move on. Okay, so we were actually talking about, say, I was actually running all these commands and kind of, one by one. Okay, now if I have to say, like, what is the meaning of scripts? Say, if I just have to go and say, like, kind of, just collect all this and say test.tcl. Now I would just put all of this. Okay, now if you guys look at it, assume I'm just putting all these things. Now I'm just say I put all these informations in a file, and then I just go and run it, and say this is the script. This is test.tickle. Now, what happened to here? Cannot find the channel name to 10. Okay. Yeah, we have. Okay, yeah, it was giving me here hint. Okay, now if you see here, it is basically whatever that we were trying to do it one by one, and now all those things I put it in this file, and then I'm kind of sourcing it, right? And also now, if you guys go and look at our scripts, say for example, so this is basically one of the scripts that I normally use. So basically get all these macros and create the routing blockage around it before you're doing your PG routing. Okay. So now that is actually, if you look at here, right, like kind of, pretty much this is what we call it, like kind of, the script. Say more than one uh, lines, you cannot go and execute it one by one. So put it always in a script and then source it. So that's what we call it, like kind of, the scripts. Okay. So So pretty much I think we have covered all this. Okay. And see whatever that we were kind of discussed. If you want to, if your intention is to do a arithmetic operations, then you need to use your EXPR, all that. Okay. See what is the right way of you defining the names, instance names. Okay, now if you look at here, right, like kind of, say I just sometime back I have just defined it, right, like kind of, say the macro B box. Normally we don't use, normal random things, say this A, B, C, and all that, right? Like those are all just okay, maybe in the initial stage, which is fine. But when the moment you start writing your actual code, so there are two things here. One is you write code for your own automation. Okay, now the second is you write the code in a such a way that that can be used across the teams. Okay, so people usually prefer that, so that that is how, say you have a problem, say for example you have a DRCs, say kind of repetitive DRCs which you wanted to fix. Okay, so it is not only you are seeing, so the other block owners also seeing those DRCs. Now you might wanted to write a piece of code which will help you as well, and the others also can see that. Okay, now having said that, what normally we do is, say here, say macro, in this case say macro llx. So I just get that, the first thing is basically, as I mentioned, so you have a macro. Now this macro, when I go and query, so it is a kind of, say, LLX, LLY. Okay, that is nothing but say X1, Y1. Okay, and then say this is upper right X and upper right Y. So that's basically X2 and Y2. So now you can actually use, I normally keep it like kind of, so if any of my team members wants to alter this kind of scripts. Okay, so looking at this, okay, so they are getting the macro LLX, macro LLY, macro upper right X, upper right Y. Now I'm post processing that using the TXPR, and then I'm actually getting a new B box around that, and then I'm actually creating the blockage. Now, how I'm actually pausing that? So, so the way you write the way you define your variables, it should be very clean and crisp. Okay, and please avoid using any of your names when when you write a code. So we tend to say kind of, your name. Say if you are kind of, say Karthik or Selva or say Jana or whatever it is, right? So people say, their name underscore A, their name underscore B, and things like that. So avoid doing all such things. Okay, so this is how, have a meaningful variable names, which would make everyone's life easier. Okay. So that is why we actually, kind of, I normally go and say people or tell people, if you are going to deal with something like kind of instance, okay, now it is going to be say kind of say instance name. Now if I have to say this, right, like kind of, this is the macro that I have selected. Now if I need that instance name, what I need to do, say get selection. Now that gives me the name of the instance. Say set inst name, basically say get selection. Now that would be the instance name. Okay. Now if I want to know what is the ref name, so it's basically the cell name. So this is an instance name which is kind of unique, and then you will have something like kind of ref name, which would be kind of say here the the name of that cell. So that basically the function. It's kind of in this case it's a SRAM. Okay. Now say set ref name. Now get attribute of this get selection. Say ref name. You are basically getting the ref name of that cell. Okay. Now I always make sure the variable names are pretty much meaningful. Okay. Okay. Now this is something, it is a kind of putting all the things together whatever we learned. Say for example set A. Now it's basically 4. Okay. Now you are actually doing something with that. So 4 plus 2, it is going to be say 6, and that would be stored in a variable B. Okay. And then now you are actually overriding that A by doing this. Say now the B is basically 6. Okay. And it is going to be 6 minus 3, and it is going to be say 3. Now this place would be printed as it is, because you're not you're kind of not using the expr, so where there will not be any arithmetic operations would be kind of performed here. Okay. Which one? Okay, so this one, I mean, it's supposed to be dollar a. Yeah, right, I agree. Yeah, agreed. So that's agreed. So that is basically a dollar a. It should be dollar a. Maybe a typo while preparing the slides. It's dollar a. Okay. Okay. And now, so we were kind of talking about the double quotes, right? Like kind of, say you want to say print, say hello, and then say dollar a. Now here it is basically printing whatever that you have kept it inside, captured inside, and then dollar a value is getting substituted. Now let's say you don't want this, or say you want to print this dollar a as it is. Now how we can actually do that? So you can actually do that using say single quote or say even curly braces. So when you use curly braces, it would just print whatever that is inside. It will not do that variable substitution. Okay, it will not do the variable substitution. So sometimes people in interviews, right, like they might ask you, okay, what is the difference between the curly brace and then square bracket? That means square bracket is going to be used to perform any kind of operation. So it is basically invokes internal shell and then performs the operation and then revert back. But whereas this curly bracket will actually used to print whatever is there inside as it is. Okay. And then you might also come across like kind of double quote, say square bracket and curly braces. Which one would you use? Say in some of the companies written tests, they will have one or two pickle related questions. So some of this kind of things I have seen some of my students were attending when they appear for written test. So make sure your curly braces means anything that is there inside it would print as it is. And if you have this double quote, the variable substitution happens. And the square bracket, it basically invokes the shell internally and then uh, performs certain operation and then gets back the store, reverts back with the values. And the one more thing here is basically we normally try to keep things like kind of, when we try to write, right, like kind of, when you have a, say, for example, set macro name, or say macro inst name. Now sometimes people have it like kind of like this. Say if the preference is basically using everything, defining everything in the same line. But if at all, if it is, if by chance, if you have to go ahead with this kind of, say extra lines, then you can actually use the backslash. Okay, a simple example is, say, if you go and look at it, let's say set clock tree options. Okay, so now, for example, now I have a, something like this. Say when I'm working with the, writing a scripts. Say for example, now what I normally do is, say I just put it here like this, and then say clock, say get clocks, say clock underscore a. Okay, and then I define, say, target latency. So it is like kind of, you can define your things, say points 5 ns, and say hyphen target skew, say 0.03. Okay, now say this is something like kind of, though you are actually executing the same only one command, but you are actually breaking it in multiple lines. Okay, you might want to, say keep it like kind of, the backslashes, where these are all belongs to the same line. That is a meaning. See, now even though you are defining that macro over here in one line, it's kind of, two lines, it is all same as this. So with the help of this backslash, so when you see, when you see the scripts with something like in multiple lines, always you should actually copy it like this and then execute it, or say understand that okay, they are all kind of belongs to same command, or same, so they're kind of one command, you can call it. Okay, okay, now the next thing is, say, how do you write a comments? Say normally, right, like kind of, if you look at here, say I have just mentioned it like kind of, what is this piece of code it is actually doing it. Okay, now that I normally have it, so that like kind of, any of my team members who are kind of, they can reuse this code, right, like, so they were, when they actually try to go through it, like kind of, okay, they know that okay, this piece of code creates the routing blockage around the macro. Now, or say create power slabs and all that things. Now what is the right way of, say here there is a derive pg connections, so there is a comments. So what is the right way of you commenting? So if you ask me, I would say go ahead and I'll just do it like this. Okay, clock tree settings, something like this. So it is kind of, you have to start any line that is actually starting, and if you add a hash, that is basically the whole line is commented. Okay, the whole line is basically commented. Now, for example, now see, you have a kind of, say set a is say 100, or say t is 100. Now you want to add something here, setting t equal to 100. Now this is not a right command. You know what, if you want, if your intention is to comment it here, then you need to add a semicolon. So in the starting, right, like the line starting, you can actually have it like kind of, the hash. And if you wanted to add it in anywhere or towards the end of the line, then you need to add, so semicolon means it is basically breaking that line. Now sometimes what we normally do is, say here, say a10. So all these things you can actually put it like kind of, in one line. So this means they are all kind of, different commands. So semicolon is basically a the line breaker, you can call it. Okay. So the comments, sometimes we might do it like kind of, as I mentioned, this say this is basically a wrong, where you might want to add a semicolon and then get it done. Okay. So the tickle expressions, so we have already seen it. But now let's say if you want to do that, like kind of, say set A is kind of 10 and set B is 15 and set C is basically 25. Okay. So well and good. Now EXPR, now dollar $A, dollar $B, dollar $C. Now, okay, let's keep dollar $B, something like this. Okay. So dollar $C slash dollar $B. So it is going to be 1 because 25 divided by 15, okay, which is going to be only one time, the 15 is there. Now, if you want to know, say for example, remainder, use this modulus where you will get the remainder. Okay. Now, for example, now if I have to add this dollar $A, now there is a problem here. Okay. We don't know how the tool takes it. Will it take the first priority of this or the first priority of dollar $B and dollar $A? You know what we need to do? You need to make sure you are actually going to define the things properly for the tool to work properly. Okay, or say in other way, your intention is say something like this. Okay, so you have to use them properly. It is like kind of uh, you need to make sure you define the brackets, because when you go and do a lot of arithmetic operations, a simple thing, say here it is just only one plus or minus, but in some of the scenarios where you might have a different operations, so it is better you actually kind of define with the brackets. It's kind of, you can say it is a defining the priority, what is the what has to be executing first. So now in this case, this would be executed first and then the next thing would be done. Okay. Okay, now the next thing is, say the loops. Okay, so we have a lot of things. Say for example, right, like kind of now in this case we have a kind of certain things over here. Now imagine if there are no macros. See, doesn't mean that there is not necessary that your designs has to have a macros. Okay, there may be designs without macros as well. Okay, now so how do you do that? Now in that case it will actually error out. You know what we normally do, you are supposed to go and check what is the macro count. So it's more than 0 or not. Say simple, when I execute this, it would actually return me something. Okay, now if, okay, now getting the count. Okay, say we have to say size of collection, because they are kind of collection, we call it like kind of collection. Now size of collection, say if the size of collection is basically greater than 0, then you go and execute it, otherwise don't execute. So that means you are actually putting a conditional check here. So on certain things, okay, if it is true, then only you go and execute, otherwise don't execute. So ideally speaking, if I have to update this particular the whole thing, what I need to do, I'll have to just go and add it like this. If it is more than 0, then only I can actually go and create it. Okay, otherwise it should not go and execute it, because when there are no macros, where would I go and create the blockages, right? So I am actually keeping it like kind of a conditional check where, okay, that's correct. So this is the command to get the macros, whatever the macros that are there in the design. And then I am actually kind of checking, so why I need this if, because I need it because only if macros are there in the design, execute this code, otherwise don't execute. Okay, now to get that or to instruct that or to get that done, you need that if loop, if conditions. Okay, now so similarly we have a kind of multiple conditions where like kind of you have got if and else. Say now for example, if, see, this is kind of execute plan A. Okay, else plan B. So this is a kind of thing that we normally do that. Okay, now on a simple note, and you may also have if else if. See, you have a kind of if else, and then if else if. See, if, say SRAM A, okay, do this. Now else if SRAM B, do this. Else if SRAM C, do this. Now nothing, it is not it is nothing, it is not SRAMs. So it may be say PLL, ADC, and then other IPs. Then all that will come in this else loop. Okay. So you might be used in, you might need to use depending on your requirement. Say, let's say you have a all the SRAMs follow similar guidelines. Okay, you can actually use it like kind of, if SRAMs. Now each of the SRAM, there may be multiple SRAMs. Now if you look at here in this DB, say this is one type of SRAM, and say this is another type of SRAM, and then this is another type of SRAM, and so we have a different SRAMs in the design. Okay, so not like kind of you would be able to use only one piece of code when you're kind of checking your placement status of the macros, or even whether it is placed in the right location as per the guidelines and everything. So individual SRAMs will come up with certain guidelines. Okay, so you might want to use these loops. Okay, and then next, say for. So it is same as what we have in other languages, kind of for loop. Okay, it is basically you define it, say for is equal to I is equal to 0 and go all the way till 100. The same way how we have, say you want to count it up to 100, then you can actually use it like kind of the for loop. Now there is something called switch case. Okay, say for example, now you might have a corners in STA, right? Like kind of we have a corners where, say uncertainty, say switch dollar corner. Okay, now imagine if this corner is basically SS, say, or say SS underscore one corner. Okay, now here uncertainty, or say even a clock frequency, right? Like kind of some companies have the different frequencies for different corners. Say kind of your clock period, T clock is 2ns. Okay, now say SS2 is basically T clock 1.9 ns. Say FF1, say kind of T and T clock is kind of say 2.2 ns. So you may have a different frequencies defined for different corners. So you might use in in those kind of scenarios, say when it comes to switch case. And now the next one is basically a break. What is this meaning of break? See, you are actually executing certain loops. Okay, say you are in middle of certain things. Now in some conditions, say you want to come out of this loop, say kind of break. So to come out of that, you can kind of say break the loop and come out of this. Okay, now the next one is basically something called continue. Say break would actually exit this whole loop, it will not continue. Okay, or say while. Okay, say break will actually exit that loop. Now continue is basically it will go back and fetch the another value. So you want to exit that loop, use break, and you want to skip that particular value or the particular step. Now use continue, it will keep continuing to the next one. Okay, and while. So what is the main use of while? Okay, while, say for example, say while set I is say 0. Now what I do is dollar I less than 100. Now puts, say dollar I, okay, and then now increment 1 or say increment I. It would actually kind of every time it increases things, and then it would actually prints it later. Now in this case the while loop will be valid, or it will be keep executing as long as this condition is true. Okay, now some scenarios, what we do in the real cases, right, kind of you might wanted to wait for a file to be available. Normally what we do is when we run a say kind of sta runs or say ecuj runs and etc, you might kind of say wait for say file a. Okay, now you don't know when this file is going to be available. Now you know what we do, we use this while loop and write a piece of code, and the moment the file is available it exits that loop. Otherwise it will sleep for, we can say sleep for 10 minutes. So this basically every 10 minutes it keeps checking, and in case if the file is available it will execute the further steps, otherwise it will kind of keep repeating. So while loop is something that used whenever there is a need for you to loop in something as long as that is valid or it's true. Okay, and the next one is basically the for each. So the for each is basically heavily used in industry. The reason is we talked about something called list, right? Say you have a say set ABC is like basically 10, 20, 30. Okay, now this is basically a list. Can you relate this with something what we have done just now in the sessions? Now, if you look at here, now if you look at this one, this is the variable. Now, how many values it actually has? One, two, say three. So it is a kind of different numbers, right? So list meaning it may have a more than one value. So now in this case, we are actually trying to get all the cells basically that are basically kind of say macro. Now let's say if I want to get all the buffs in the design, say buff list, say okay, buff. Okay, so ref name is equal to buff. Now it is actually kind of it returns all the cells that are kind of the buffer. Okay, now this to get the size, the count, say we use say size of collection and then say dollar buff. Okay, so now to process all these, right, like let's say you want to print all of this one by one. Okay, now we need to use something called for each. So now since this is something collection, there's a kind of the structure that is kind of used by the EDA tools, it's called collections. So now before that says say set A B C D. Now say kind of 10, 20, 30, and 40. Okay, now I want to add say value 2 to each of this element. I want to process one by one and add, say, just some number. Okay, what I'm going to do is, say, for each, say, kind of, v, just that is a variable, say, internal variable. Okay, now dollar a b c d. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, say, puts now dollar int variable. Okay, plus expr, see, 5. Now I'm actually kind of, adding each of the thing and then printing it. Now let's say if I wanted to print, so dollar. So now this is the original variable and this is after adding 5 to each of it. Now let's say for each is something that I need it to process one by one. Okay, let's say if I have, multiple variables and then now I wanted to process them one by one. Now for each is the one which we normally use it. Okay, so these are all the kind of, you can say, control structures or say kind of loops that we can actually are present in TCL and we can actually use them. Okay, so if, else if, and else, so we have just discussed about this. Say for example, now here 10, x is 10. So if it is a less than 4, okay, say execute this piece of code. Okay, you might do some kind of, something, some operations. Now say if it is a greater than 4, okay, execute this part. So else if, okay, it's not if else, it is else if, and then again else, it is basically, yeah, you're audible. I'll give you, yeah, okay. So now if, else if, and else, you can actually use it like this. Okay, and while loop is something, say, what we discussed, right? Like kind of, let's say you want to print, say, set I is 0 and while dollar I less than 10. Okay, see, puts dollar I, okay, and then now increment I. So it is basically, if you look at here, I'm just trying to print. So it's basically this, I wrote it in one line, but now ideally speaking, I would actually put it like this. Say for example, say the actual code is this. Okay, now the same code I have just put it in a line. Now while loop is basically going to execute, as long as the condition is true. Now if you, in this case, I have just set this I, right? Now let's say if I go and say print I, dollar I, now it is going to be, say, 11, because now when I say 11, it is now out of this loop because this condition becomes false, because dollar I is 11, 11 less than 10, that is basically a false. Okay, so you might want to use while in such scenarios. Okay, now a simple thing here is basically while reading the files, you might want to use them. Okay, or reading the files and line one by one line, you might want to use this while loop. As long as it is not the end of line, end of file, EOF, you might want to keep reading one by one, keep reading the lines one by one. Okay, Okay, so list. So now list basically, as I mentioned, we when you add more than one values, when you wanted to have uh, create a variable with more than one value, we will have it like kind of it's called a list. Okay, now how you want to how are you going to process the whole thing? Now say for example, now red, green, blue. Now there are two ways you can actually, or multiple ways you can define a list. Say one is this, so multiple values using curly braces. Now the second is using this double quotes. Okay, and another one is say using something called list 10, 20, and 30. Say set A, that is one way. Say set A, another one say set A. So these are all kind of the creating the list. So you can use either of it. Okay. Now how do you get the number of elements in the list? Say for example, you have got this, right? Okay, now I have a b c d as a list. Say set l length, or basically you can say l length. Now abcd dollar abcd l length is used to get the number of elements in the list. Now let's say you want to get this first element. Now what do we do is, it's basically now you need to use something called l index. Okay, so l index, say l index. Now dollar abcd, say 2. Now the second element is basically third. It's ideally speaking, the way the locations here, say when you run l length, it returns the number of elements, so it is basically 4. But when you query your index, it is always starts with the first is 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so now l index 0 will give you 10, and l index say something, when you say this end, it is kind of say 40. Okay, now try to understand it this way. Now why do we use l index? So now when you run, so now I want to process this. Now how would I pick this up? So this is a kind of four variables. Now I want to get this first one. Now how would I do this? So now l index, say this dollar macro b box, say now 0. So now here remember, this is basically a kind of list, nested list kind of thing. So this is a first element and this is a second element. Now if you extract your first element, there are two elements internally. Okay, now I have to just say 0 0. Now that means this would get me the first element. So now it is going to be easy for me. Say set llx. Okay, now this is the way I can actually get my llx. Now this is going to be my lly. Okay, and then now upper right x, I can actually get this way done. And then now if I look at this, say now upper right y. Now if I have to create the similar list, okay, say sit macro b box new. Okay, now what I need to do is say kind of list. Now say list llx and dollar $lly. Okay, and then space. Now okay, so before that say dollar $llx, dollar $lly, and dollar $urx and dollar $ury. So now I kind of created a list. Now what I would like to do here, now if I have to do this, right, like kind of say set llx underscore new, which is basically expr dollar $llx. say -1. Okay, now so this is my new LLY. Say set URX expr, say underscore new, and then say +1. I'll explain you why it is. Okay, now set macro bbox new is going to be, ideally speaking, say $llx new, $lly new, and then $urx new, and $urx new. Say like this. So now I have actually kind of created it. Now why I'm trying to do this is, say assume I want to create a routing blockage around this area. Okay, so now I kind of created this. Now what I need to do, I got all these values. Now what I need to do is get to know the command. Okay, say create routing blockage. So when I go and look at the man page, it would actually tell me, okay, say create routing blockage, what layer, and it needs the location in this format. Say this is the kind of list. Okay, now here, if you look at here, there's a one bounding box or B box. Now inside that X1 and Y1 or LLX, LLY, and the second element is now URX and URY. Okay, now if you look at this particular thing, right, like now we, if you try to use that whatever that we have created, that may not work because it is not in the format that it is actually expecting. So what we need to do is we need to now kind of go and change it. Say for example list. See list, these two is kind of one list that I'm creating, and then say another list that I'm actually creating. Now if you see here, it is actually kind of in the same order that it is kind of expecting. So it is a one list. In that x1 y1 is one and x2 y2 is another one. So now let's go and actually look at the command and try to write it. Say create routing blockage. Say for example layers, say m4, or say even you can say like kind of m1, m2, m3, and m4. So we are actually trying to block all those layers. Okay, and then so the name, it's just the name actually, the blockage name, say or blockage, say kind of I would always keep it like kind of user routing blockage. Okay, and then I might be interested in doing it like kind of say boundary. Say now this boundary is something that I would be using this one. Okay, so it is actually kind of created like kind of 0, 1, 2, and 3 for individual layers. Now if you go and enable the blockage, okay, now you can see here the we what we did was we have just picked up this macro, and we have actually queried the location, and we kind of want the reason why we were doing this all this, I don't want any PG routings to come closer. Okay, it might create DRCs or kind of create shorts, so I want them to be stay far. Okay, now to get that I have to create a routing blockage. Now, if you look at here, so there is a M1 routing blockage that I have created. Now, let's say if I take out this M1, now say this is M2, okay, routing blockage, and then say M3, okay, and then say M4, okay. So we have created the routing blockage up to 4 layers. So now this, whatever that we have done here is basically we have put it like all these, we kind of executed it individually. Okay, now putting all these things in the similar one file and executing it will actually help you. Okay, um, you can reuse it, so and also you can actually do it for all the macros. So now to do that you need to, so we have done it for only one macro, correct? Now you need to loop through all the macros, so whatever that we have done just now, right, like the for each. Now that we would be kind of using the for each. Now you can loop through each of it and then create the routing blockage around each and every macro. Okay, and coming back to the list, so list has multiple operations where L index is used to get the values out, and for each is used to loop through, and L append. Now you want to create a new list, so L append could be the one which you can just keep adding one of it. Okay, and then you want to search certain element, so L search, and you want to sort. Okay, and you want to get replace certain values, certain elements, L replace, and you want to get certain range of the data, you can actually use any of these things. Okay, and so this is something like kind of we use L append to create a new list. Okay, okay. So I would like any questions. Yes, you are audible. Go ahead with your question. So for each regularly works on a regular simple list, whereas when you go and execute anything with the commands like kind of get cells, these are all called list. Okay, say for example, now it will always return, say for example, now if I have to say set a get cells star. Now when I try to print this dollar a, it would be kind of collection. So any command, anything that you are processing with get underscore, it is always called collections. Now if you are just dealing with say set a b c d, this is basically kind of, we call it like kind of simple list. Okay, so that is the main thing. So if it is a simple list, you can use for each, and if it is a collection, then you need to use for each in collection. Yeah. Okay, so we would be starting a new mentorship on this particular thing where we will be having a complete hands-ons. So the languages we would cover is basically Tickle, Perl, and complete tool scripts and the utilities writing in the tool. So the duration is going to be say 8 weeks, and the timing is kind of 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. or it depends. If people enroll from other country, it would be different timings, and the classes happens only on weekends, Saturday and Sunday, and we would be having the tool access for a month, so it is not just 7 days anymore. So it is kind of for 1 month we would be having access to both icc2 and pt and other tools also. uh, okay, you will be writing the code, so whatever that I have shown you. Now I would be giving you the problems, and you would be ending up in writing the code. Okay, and if any of you are interested, you can get in touch with me, and you might have seen the way how we write the code. So if you look at some of the problems that we would be covering in the sessions would be like kind of, say you might have a congestion. Now how do you create small blockages to reduce the congestion, and say create a path groups after one round of placement and run incremental opt automatically. And you may have a timing violation, which is basically kind of, we call it like kind of, critical path. Now you might be, your manager might ask you, okay, can you swap all the cells to say ulvt or elvt or whatever it is, and see if the timing is meeting. So now how would you do it with the help of script? So you may have a top 100 paths. Now you might want to do that. Okay, all take all those paths and then swap all those cells to ulvt. And next, say pre-place all those critical cells next to each other, just to avoid, you can also write a piece of code. And you may have a net, right? Say for example, everyone knows that, when you have a critical path, say if this is your path, now you will eventually have the cells that are kind of, connecting, or so or connect all these nets and then apply ndr for all these nets. So that also you might be able to do it. And so there might be mbist kind of logic coming in. So whether your macros are grouped based on your mbist spec. And sometimes what we may do is, like, when you're starting the project, you might just have a very large stub. You will not have any internal, so you may not have a left. So you can actually create a dummy left, your own dummy left, and then get started on your own. And let's say you are doing a eco. Okay, so now you might want to know what are all the buffers that you can actually use it. So how do you get to know that? So it is not just naming, you're gripping the name. In fact, there is something called a function. So you need to go and get that function. Okay, or something called a footprint. Hey, can you please go on mute? Can you please go on mute? Okay, so you would actually eventually write out all the equivalent cells from the dotlet. Okay, so now by doing this, which means you should know how to open a file, read a file, and process the file, getting exactly what you are looking at and all that. And let's say you are actually having a trans max tran violations in the design. So now you can actually write your own script to fix those violations. Okay, and now when you're doing that, say you may have to look at, say, is that lower drive, if the driver is lower drive or it is a long net. So you need to look at, so if it is a lower drive, upsize the cell. If it is a long net, insert buffer. So all these, how would you make it, yourself, you can write yourself. And now say you have a path. Okay, say for example, now if I ask you, say, say timing setup dot report. Now I have got my setup timing report. Now, if you look at here, this is the column that we look at incremental delay. Now, any cell, say if you look at here, this particular path is basically kind of, having a slack of 300 PS. Now, how would you go and fix it? Say I wanted to now figure out how many cells that are more than 100 PS. Say cell 1, which is more than 100 PS. So 1, 2, 3, okay, 4, say 5, say 6. Okay, now say here there is a, okay, there is a flop. We don't do touch that. Say any cell which is having more than 100 PS. Now swap them to LVT and check whether your timing is meeting or not. So how do you do that? Okay, and now the timing path summary from your timing report. Say you might have 100 corners. Now how do you know, okay, whether each corner is kind of violating or not? So each, say, corners, say for example, say setup 1. Okay, what is a WNS, what is a TNS, and what is the number of failing endpoints and all that. Say setup 2, what is a WNS, TNS, and failing endpoints. So it is a kind of summary report where You can actually come up with your own format. Okay, and parse, it's basically set up where hold to fix, or you can say when you're fixing hold, right, you might have the same endpoint violating across the corners. Now how would you insert, or how do you decide what delay cells that you are supposed to use, and what is the setup margin that is available? And these are all some of the practical, we are not limited to this, these are all some of the real time thing that I normally work on day to day basis. And the next thing is basically when it comes to a macro, say you might have to do all this. Say before you running placement, you might have to check the macro placement status, and whether they are all fixed or they are kind of placed. And now let's say, imagine if some of them are kind of, you write out a report and you mark all of them as a fixed. Now some of them are not in the right location, so not, some macros are not following the guidelines. So now how would you do that? Okay, and then say write all these kind of procs, say unplace all the macros. Say you have done the floor plan, now you want to redo the macro placement. Now it might be having all of the macros may have a fixed attribute. It's not possible to fix, go unfix one by one. So have a proc, unplace all the macros. And now whatever today we discussed, it is just a template code where create routing blockage around the macro. Now you can actually provide how many layers, say M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, and etc. Okay, and cut site rows around the macros. Okay, and check macro placement and add boundary buffer. And even you can actually place the macros also, using the scripts. And you may have a drcs, and you might want to write a piece of code to fix those drcs through with the help of the scripts. Okay, and sometimes you might have to even write a small piece of code to do a custom routings. So how do you do that, and how do you work with all this? So these are all the problems that we normally cover in the mentorship program. And also we cover Perl also. Say for example, now inside the tool, whatever that we are talking, all these, right, these are all inside the tool. Now outside the tool, let's say for example, now you want to parse all these reports. Okay, so you might have a n number of sta corners, right? Now I want a corner summary, and I want, say, top 10 start point and end points for each of the corners summary. And so you can actually write lot of things outside the tool, say, to process. Okay, now all those we would be covering, and everything is completely hands-on, and with the help we would be giving the tool as well, tool access. uh, in case if any of you are interested, get in touch with me. And we may have one more session covering Perl basics as well next week. Okay, yeah, go ahead. The scope is limited to the scripting part. I you know you some yeah, I understand that some of the people, they usually ask me for tool access, but normally this is only meant for we would give you the db and you would be working on that db. Yeah, all your problems, see, that's what I normally do, that see, I might have not seen the scenario what your manager was asking, so you can actually explain, and we will try to work on your problems as well. So the question here is, okay, the question was like kind of, I have my own set of problems where my manager was asking for some data. Uh, would you be able to, help me with that covering as well? So the answer is yes, obviously, because see, I have limited problems, but you might have a different scenario. So you guys have to make sure you explain me the things, making sure, I understand. Then we can actually discuss, and it is eventually, if say 10 people or 15 people come with different problems, so it is a big lesson, right? We can actually learn it. And it is not that we are kind of limited with only certain problems. So it is kind of we can actually work as much as problems. And the way I do is, I normally give the problems before and I ask you guys to work it out, and I give a hint. And now you guys will have to go and explore what commands, and then how would you be able to use that. Say which syntax. Say some people might forgot not to use a while loop. Say in certain scenarios they might try with if and else. So I might give them a hint, okay, try with while loop and etc. So it's a kind of problem. I would be throwing a problem and making sure you think through and you use the right syntax and you come up with your own solution with the help of my guidance. Yeah, hi. Yeah, go ahead. 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. So there are two meetings here because there might be many people. So, uh, okay, like give me a minute. Yeah, go ahead now. Okay, will you be able to share your environment with me to check things? No. Will you be able to share the screen with me? No, no. That's you answered already the question. Now, if you have a tool and your libraries may be different and your environment may be different. Now, I cannot eventually see what code you are writing, and I cannot eventually take a control and execute certain things. Correct? No, here we are actually having the environment which you get access. Practice here and take this learning to your work environment and execute things over there. So I know every one of us will have a, your environment, work environment different, and you may have a different tools. Now, I wanted everyone to follow the similar environment for easy learning. Okay. And then you take this learning to your environment and work it on. Others to, not everyone will have Innovos with us, right? So we have ICC2 and PT and Fusion Compiler and all that. So the whole Synopsys tools we have. So let's learn the whole thing. One tool and one with a focus on certain environment and certain libraries, because I may have a certain libraries, you may have a different libraries, you might be working on 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, and etc. Now, so there are, I wanted to provide the same environment which we use for our learning, and then you take that learning and follow in your work environment. Okay. So the fee is basically, so 10K plus GST. Now, so early bird is basically you get 10% if you are enrolling in next 1 week. So it would be kind of 9,000 plus GST. And if you are enrolling as a group, so you get 10 more percent additional discount. So if you are one person, by next week, if you are enrolling, it will be 9,000 plus GST. And if you are enrolling minimum three and more or more, then you will get say kind of 20% discount plus GST, 18%. Okay. Yeah. It is, it is not 4 weeks. It is eight. Okay. Okay. So it is basically the duration is 8 weeks. See, I don't normally limit it. The duration is something normally we kind of, we go with. In the previous batch and all, I went more than 10 weeks also. Okay. So online, it's completely online. So the program is completely online, and the regular fee is 10K plus 18% GST. Now, early bird is basically, so if you enroll it before next Saturday, you get 10% discount, and group discount. So if three people or more, then you get basically 20%. Yeah, right. Okay. You would have got an email, or say you can actually, okay, so let me just give you the numbers. I did all this but without contact. So my mobile number is basically 83108 58699 and myself Kumar. Okay, you guys can get in touch with me on through this number. We are, I was there, in, there. Now I'm out, and then we have now VLSI mentors. So then I think you might be knowing me then. Ah, okay. Ah, okay, okay, all right. So yeah. So you can also search in LinkedIn as well. So you can find me in LinkedIn as well. So this is me. So you guys can. So this is my LinkedIn. In case if any of you wanted to connect, go ahead. So it would be like it would be in the name of Kumar K, PD trainer. Okay, all right. So we will have a one more session next week as well. Pearl will go over the similar way, and then we will get started with the classes. Okay. Um, Thanks everyone. Yeah. Bye.